Welcome to Crafting a Meaningful Life. This is an exciting day for me because it's a first for me on my podcast. I have a guest that I've never had before. I've never had a rabbi on my show before. I've had Jewish people, but never a rabbi. And I was even like, oh, I don't want to be nervous or But in Utah, we actually have a pretty good, strong Jewish community that when I was in the catering business, I worked for a lot. In fact, as many of you know, Jewish weddings were my favorite thing to cater because they went on forever and they lasted forever. And you had so many different parts to it. But the best part was the dancing. The dancing at all Jewish weddings is off the top. It is amazing. They do the chair thing and that whole thing. And the local rabbi that I dealt with a lot, Rabbi Benny Zippel, was such a wonderful help to me in being non-Jewish to get into the Jewish community and learn their traditions. And there is this sense out there that, in fact, right now that I don't know what's going on in the world, that suddenly we think Jews are behind everything that's bad in the world. And for me and my personal experience with their community is that they are actually driving such wonderful good things and lifting so much. And that's why when I had the opportunity to bring Rabbi Shalom Hammer onto my show, I absolutely jumped at it. We had a great WhatsApp call to kind of get to know each other. And now he's with me today. Rabbi, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Mary. And I think after that introduction, I might just take you around on tour with me to speak about the Jewish people.
And I would absolutely love that, as long as we can attend a few weddings along the way.
Sounds good.
And just to learn the traditions, I think it's amazing. And I don't know, maybe this is not what you're here to talk about, but maybe you might have some insight. And just to start off so people get to know you, I'd like, obviously you've been in Israel for 32 years. Where did you live before that?
I grew up in New York. Right next
Thus
to
the New
Utah.
York accent. I was wondering
Yeah,
where that came from.
yeah. You could take the boy out of Brooklyn, but you can't take the Brooklyn out of the boy, as they say.
Absolutely. All right. So then what brought you to Israel?
Well, I grew up as an Orthodox Jew. My parents brought me up as such. And part of our Orthodox training, if you may, or our education was to subscribe and embrace Zionism, a
Uh,
love for the establishment of the modern state of Israel, a love for the biblical state of Israel or the land of Israel. And it's always been part and parcel of our existence, of our education, of our tradition.
yeah.
And it was actually infused in us when we were even in primary school that the Jewish home is ultimately the land of Israel. And that's
Yeah.
where we belong. So it was almost a natural segue, a natural fit for myself and my wife right after we got married. We just didn't look back. It was a natural
Mm.
sort of a natural progression to go and find ourselves living in Israel.
I've been to Israel. I absolutely fell in love with Israel. One of the places I always want to go back before I'm done traveling is to Israel. Um, just to be there in that land that has so much history. And the crazy part when we were in Jerusalem is that, as you well know, I'm not telling you anything, but this is for my listeners, okay, that you would pass from the Jewish portion of the city into the Arab portion of the city and back into the Jewish in another part. And it wasn't like a wall and there wasn't animosity. I never felt unwelcomed in any of those parts. And that part really struck me because on the airwaves, all we see is the divisiveness there and not the ability to live alongside each other. And then of course if I moved to Israel, I probably would move to Tel Aviv because all the restaurants there are amazing. Great food, and the culture, the depth of the culture there is unbelievable to me. So I get it. To come home to that must have been a huge draw for you and a huge opportunity for you to step into that next phase of your life of owning every piece of who you are. You're an author. You've written 10 books. You are a public speaker, obviously, because you do very well on camera, but you also have like a day job. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, for the last almost 15 years, I've served as a combat lecturer, a motivational lecturer in the Israeli army, in the Israeli Defense Forces. And I am part of what's called the Jewish Identity Branch for the soldiers in the Israeli army, predominantly Jewish forces, although I speak to Arab soldiers and Druze soldiers and non Jewish soldiers as well. It's part of the educational force of the Israeli army, infusing ideology, understanding what a soldier is, what it means to be a soldier for a nation, representing our land. And also, I'm also a lecturer, part of the educational branch of the Israeli army. So we speak about nationalism and patriotism and ideology and understanding our roots, our traditions, the connection and the importance of our connection to our land. So that's what I predominantly was doing for quite a few years. In addition, I was also an educator in what's called pre-military academies. These are young people, young
Yeah.
adults who decide that before they go into what's called mandatory service in the Israeli army, which for young men is mandatory from about 18 years old for 3 years. For young women, it's mandatory for about 2 years. And these youngsters decide that before they go in to serve in military, they want to take a year to learn about and find out about more about the land, about their traditions, and really about who they are and what they represent and what the land represents to them, what the nation represents to them. So I'm an educator in these institutions as well. So I have a wondrous opportunity to mix and mingle and converse with these youngsters who are really starting out a very focal part of their lives, of their future, a very significant part of their future. So I have a chance not only to meet them and to discuss and learn from them, but also to a certain extent to shape them. And
Yeah.
it's a fantastic thing. And then, of
I want
course,
to I want
go
to
ahead.
stop
Sorry.
right there for just a minute, and I want to commend you. I experienced. I didn't know it was you who was teaching these soldiers. But it was such a profound experience for me. As you were talking, it just flooded back to me. We were at the Holocaust Museum, and there, of course, lots of soldiers there. And I stepped away from the group when I took the opportunity to go up and talk to them. And I don't think I've ever been so moved by a group of young people as I was with them. Their vision of why they were there and why they served, I was something I hadn't experienced before. It wasn't that they were there because they didn't know what else to career to go into, or because if they served, then maybe they'd get a college education. They were there out of patriotism and out of commitment and out of a mission for what they knew they stood for. And they were all united. You didn't have some over here on the sideline going, oh, rolling their eyes and like, okay, whatever. I mean, they were, and then you had some zealots, but no, they were all focused on this, why they were there. And they were just a delight to talk to. So whatever you're doing, yeah, could you just come back over here and do that here? It's
Well,
phenomenal.
I mean, listen, I mean, I often explain, first of all, that's very beautiful, and I appreciate you saying that. I wouldn't say it was me. I mean, there's quite a few lecturers in the Army. I'd probably hold them more accountable than myself, but it is an honor to be a part of this effort. And I often explain to people, particularly to Jewish people, but also in communities abroad and outside of Israel, this is something that I consistently remind soldiers, and that is, it's one thing to have armament and combat and technology, and all that is very, very important. And that's our physique and that's our brute force. But if we are not capable of combining that with the philosophy, a theology, an understanding of who we are and why
Yeah,
we're still here after thousands of years, regardless of all of the journeys and persecutions that we've gone through, then our strength can be compromised. And that's a theme that I consistently emphasize.
yeah.
So I appreciate what you're saying.
And that comment right there, to fortify yourself so your strength is never compromised, is as applicable as it was thousands of years ago as it is today. Shalom, you
Absolutely.
had something significant happen in your life that you didn't see coming. That was like, I always say we learn three different ways. We learn by pinpricks, just little nudges, or sometimes we get a 2x4. This is like, wake up. And sometimes we get a freight train. And sometimes you survive that freight train, and sometimes you don't. You had a freight train. So share with my listeners a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how to describe it. I guess a freight train would work, but um, you know, 2.5 years ago, our dear daughter Gila, at the young age of 18, died by suicide, and no one saw it coming, as you said, because no one in their right mind would ever see something like that coming, because we are prone as human beings, generally speaking, to embrace life. And
Yeah,
we can't even fathom death is very hard for us to comprehend and to deal with. And certainly inviting death, so to speak, or taking
yeah.
one's life is extreme. It's unimaginable,
To choose
unfathomable.
death. Yeah, we don't choose death ever,
Yeah,
except sometimes
no
when the
question. In
pain is
fact,
so great, you
yeah.
don't see
In
another
fact, you
way.
mentioned at the beginning of your talk a few moments ago, Mary, you said about walking from the Muslim and the Christian and the Jewish quarters in the old city of Jerusalem. All three of those Abrahamic faiths, all of them will agree that the most prized quality, the most important attribute that we have that is or could be religiously based, faith based, is the value of life.
Yeah.
And that's why the human being has so much resilience. And by the way, that's why I'm able to speak to you today, regardless of the fact that I've been slapped in the face or slammed to the ground by the absolute worst catastrophe
Yeah.
that no one should ever have to imagine, the loss of my child. And nonetheless, I wake up in the morning with pain, with torment. And not only do I try to confront the day, but I try to help others confront the day as well, so that these kind of tragedies should never happen again. And when you asked me about what I do, what I work in, I mean, a large part, and I'm sure you'll speak more about it, but a large part of my work, of my efforts, has started to focus and championing mental health awareness and suicide prevention as a result of the way that God, so to speak, really slapped me into a reality. It's the only way that I know to respond, if you may.
And you thought you knew where you were going, what your mission was, what your life was focused on, and then all of a sudden God went, "No, no. Look over here. This is what you're going to be about now."
I'm sorry. I just wanted to say one thing, and that is, you said that God said to me, look this way, and yeah, as a religiously, firm person, I do believe that that's correct. But I even add that not just God said that, but Gila, our daughter,
Ah,
continues to say that to us every day.
that's a beautiful way to think about that. Her gift to you. Wow. When you think about that in terms of the broader spectrum of that she gave up life on this planet that others might be saved and that parents might be know where to take a look and to wake up and to reach out. I think that is probably the one thing that parents who have gone through what you have gone through have learned to survive if they get involved in this, in helping others to survive. But parents oftentimes don't know what to do. They don't recognize the signs until, like you, along came the 2x4 and freight train and knocked you down. So, how do you teach and what do you teach about these signs that really we all should be looking for? I'm a parent and a grandmother, but my children are grown now. But it doesn't mean that I shouldn't be also still watching out for them and my grandchildren. What should I be
And
looking for?
yourself, by the way, might I
And
add. I mean,
myself.
we all have to be in mental check and physical check with ourselves. Um, yeah, I mean, to address your question, so typically speaking, like when the Bible speaks about a tragedy such as the worst possible tragedy, God forbid, of losing one's child, the Bible tells us about Jacob, our forefather, who kind of for 22
Yeah.
years in the impression of assuming that Joseph was no longer alive, really did not do anything. I mean, he didn't educate,
Mm.
he didn't direct, he didn't initiate, he didn't build. And that is one response, if you may, or lack of it thereof, to a tragedy, to a loss of a child. But
To
I
just
opted, I've
close
always
in
been an
and go
activist.
recluse. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And to take that pain and allow the pain to really smother you, which it can, there's no question, and which it does, by the way, to me, many times as well. But I opted also to, the only way that I could make sense, if you may, out of this loss was by trying to help others. So I developed lectures, um, presentations, which I called in commemoration of Gila. I call them Gila's Way, and they specifically target breaking stigmas, mental health awareness, and suicide prevention by educating the multitudes of people out there who not only are not aware of the signs, the issues, but are not prepared, many of them, to speak and converse about and dialogue about these issues. And by the way, I'm not talking about just, so to speak, laymen. I'm speaking also about professionals, psychologists, psychiatrists, who very often avoid the word as a taboo, suicide, and it's a mistake. Suicide is not a mental illness, it's a symptom that exists within many mental illnesses. And it has to be addressed because the only way that you can help someone who has suicide ideation or who is thinking or contemplating and in such a deep darkness of despair and of depression or anxiety, where the only thing that they think that they can do is to turn to ending their lives, particularly when we're speaking about young adults, and you throw into the equation impulsivity and lack of understanding that things are finite and a very skewed, narrow vision of their world. And the majority of them, and this is something that I consistently remind people, the majority of people who die from suicide don't want to die. They want to live. They just find themselves in a deep, dark corner. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to respond. And the point is that if we converse and if we discuss with them, but it begins with ourselves and understanding a little bit and validating what they're going through, and then starting a conversation with them, that it can absolutely impact in saving lives. So within my lectures and presentations, I offer signs, I offer the story of Gila, of what happened to her, and her, so to speak, journey from being a rambunctious, vivacious, social butterfly to becoming a child who had great concern with herself, with her surroundings, with her ability to survive. And had I known then what I know now, the script of this tragedy might have been very different. And I need people to read that script.
Mm. Thus, why you're here today. And by the last time I talked to you, you were just heading off to South Africa to speak. And why you write your books and children's books. Now, are your children's books that you've written, are they geared towards this idea of supporting this? How are you doing that with your children's books?
Children's books, by the way, I wrote 5 books prior to those children's books. They're all primarily for adults. And
Uh,
then when Gila died, Gila was madly in love with children. She gravitated to children. I think she had a certain innocence and she understood children, and children understood her, and they gravitated to her. And I felt that, one of my ways of responding as well
Mhm.
was writing.
Yeah.
And I felt the most appropriate way to write something in memory of dear Gili was children's books, because that's what she would want me to tell.
Mm.
And so I wrote a series called Gila Spreads Joy. Gila, by the way, Mary, in Hebrew means joy. It means happiness.
Oh, the
So,
opposite of what my name means. The opposite of what Mary means.
oh, really? Oh, it's interesting
I've
because
been told that Mary means bitterness. And I'm like,
I just
well,
was going
okay.
to say, in
Yeah.
Hebrew, mar, like mare, is bitter. But
Yeah.
I got to tell you, Mary, it doesn't fit you. So I don't know. Maybe you should probably change your name to Gila. You
I think
probably
I should.
be more
I'm going
fitting
to have
for
a
you.
new middle name, Mary Gila.
You can wear it with pride. But
Yeah.
the point is that so I decided to write these children books, and I really had to learn actually.
Yeah.
I figured, oh, I'll write a children's book. How hard could that be? And I picked up my pen, so to speak, and started writing. And then I wrote, whoa! When I sent it to a bunch of children's authors, and they said, dude, you've got to learn how to write a children's book. And it's an art. It really is an art form. And I had to teach myself to do it. And thank God I had wonderful people around me who were helping me. I had an incredible animator who never met
Oh,
Gila in her
sure.
life. And just through pictures, she animated Gila, and she caught every expression in cartoon within that book. It's absolutely amazing. And
How
I
do
wrote
people
5 books.
find these? How do they find these books? Are they available on Amazon or?
They are. They're available on Amazon. Gila Spreads Joy series. There's Gila Loves Her Family, Gila Loves Her Neighbors, Gila Loves People, Gila Loves Her Friends, and Gila Loves Animals. And every single story, by the way, is based upon a true story that happened to Gila in her life. You see, Gila was a
Mm.
very inviting, non-judgmental person who loved people, and she would embrace people in the street. She'd go to people if they looked a little sad. She'd say, "What's going on? Are you okay? Let me give you a hug. You look so beautiful today." That was the kind of person that she was. And the stories bring that out. And also at the end of the stories, there are questions that children can follow and engage
Mm.
in, speaking about empathy. And how can I help the person next to me, or how, different things that they can relate to. And they're just beautiful books, a great tribute to her.
Okay, well, you've just solved one of my life's problems of what to put in my stockings for my grandchildren this holiday season. So thank you.
It'll be the
I'm going to
first
go
time
on
that
and buy them today.
A Jewish author has his book stuffed in a Christmas stocking. But
Yeah,
that
no, there's
sounds great.
something crazy about that, but I love that concept. Okay.
That's fine. Thank you.
Yeah. And then notice I didn't say Christmas. I said holiday because even within my own family, we have different variations. And I still
Okay,
have a Christmas tree, but we celebrate the holidays and embrace them. And,
gotcha.
I have one member, my daughter, who lights the candles every season. And
Oh wow,
it's that idea of teaching her children the embracing of all people and all customs and the beauty of them all. So your books will be very welcome here.
thank you, thank you.
Okay, so then as you think about, what you decided you wanted to teach people, writing this books was a perfect expression way to do this. But I can imagine when you actually speak to people and people get to see you and your face and to know that this person experienced the worst of all possible tragedies. I've often said that we are born into this life expecting to bury our parents. They really don't have any question about that. No one comes into this life expecting to bury their children. It's just so out of the way life should happen. And yet you experience that. And whenever I have talked with people who have actually gone through this, I am completely and totally amazed at their resilience. Because I don't talk to the ones who caved in and are in a closet somewhere, because they're not available to me. They're in their closet. I only get to talk to the ones who have now learned to reach out as part of their healing process. And the resilience that they have taught me has been incredible. How did you come to your place of resilience?
Uh, you know, I'll tell you something. People could say a lot of things about me. He's not intelligent. He's not,
I wouldn't say that.
I'm just saying that people
Yeah.
might want to say things like that. Um, the point is that one thing that I don't think anyone could say about me, uh, I'll say this myself, is that, and I pride myself in my modesty. But one thing that I think that people can say is that I'm insincere. In other words, I'm a sincere person,
Uh,
and I don't like falsities. I don't like insecurities. I don't like anything that's fake and not real. And sincerity, I think what happens is that sincerity just finds itself, right? So, for example, my sincere response to the loss of my child was, I cannot allow this to happen to other people. And what happened was, Mary, is that after Gila died, about a month afterwards, I would start getting phone calls from parents or spouses or siblings
ah,
who had family members who were suffering. What do we do? What do we do? Where do we turn to? What are our options? How did you react? How do we respond? And the truth is that it was almost ludicrous that they were calling me because truthfully, I don't know. But
yeah,
I said I better find out because I don't want to take a phone call like that and feel as helpless as I did in terms of trying to save Gila's life. Now, I don't have guilt, neither does my wife with Gila's death, but I have a lot of questions that will never be answered. And I have a lot of could haves and should haves and would haves.
yeah.
And I don't want those to be lining up behind the next person. And so I started to research and discuss and converse and speak and lecture. And I became certified as a mental health first aid instructor.
You did that after Gila's death.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Wow.
I
Okay.
I, I want to tell you something, Mary. I at the whole and this is what's quite, I don't know if it's disturbing or amazing at the same time. But prior to Gila's death, mental health was an anomaly to me. It was not something it was a foreign entity. And now it's become my best friend.
Yeah.
So, and with sometimes I'll come to my wife and I'll say to her, someone just called me up. I can't believe that they don't know. And she'll say, dude, neither did you 2 years ago.
Right.
And she reminds me of that, as every good wife is supposed to. And, and she's right. And what happens is that when I lecture, when I speak, look, in the end of the day, uh, uh, excuse me for saying this, I'm going to be totally honest because that's just the way I like to speak. I am a
Absolutely.
very good speaker. Okay, and I can speak to a large room, and every person will believe that I'm speaking to them personally, which usually is a sign of a good
I get that.
orator.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I can I would, but the reason why I'm also a good speaker is not because of my oratory skills or my homiletics. It's really because I'm sincere, and I can give the same lecture or presentation every time. I'll feel like it's the first because I'm speaking to a new audience. And what happens inevitably is that after I finish speaking, many people will come over to me and say, I need to speak to you. I need to speak to you. I need to ask you a question. Do you have a few minutes? Can I contact you? And that's where the real work begins, because that's where the people who are suffering or the family members who are watching their family members suffer, that's when things kick in. And when you start having impact and you start bringing them hopefully to a better place or their family members to a safer place.
There's nothing like that experience, Shalom, as I'm also a public speaker. And as you can imagine, I'm very dramatic, but I also know when quiet is the key because then people listen. And at the beginning, I usually tell people that there's one. I know I'm here, at least for one. There is one of you whose life will be changed forever. And I hope that all of you leave uplifted, but there's one that will be changed forever. And I know that at deep levels. And afterwards, I'll have dozens of people come up and say, I'm the one. I'm the one. And I know they are. And the difference between a great orator and the person that does what you do and what I do is the sincerity. Is that every time I speak, and I know this about you already, every time you speak, we speak from here. And we are able to share that with them. And they see our vulnerability, our realness, and they listen. And that allows them to open up and receive it. That's a gift. And that's why you must speak. Because not everyone has that. Even though you might be a great speaker and a great orator, it's different when it comes from this place. So thank you for moving that needle forward and being willing to speak about this, which is so painful for you.
Thank you.
So what do you think as you go along here will be the single greatest thing that you do that will turn the tide of suicide?
You know, it's so interesting because when you were saying, when you were speaking about, you know, what I do and stand up in front of people and speaking, and you were talking about also what you do in terms of moving people and having people come over and said, you know, you say you made a difference in my life. You
Yeah.
made an impact in my life. The answer to that question is I don't have delusions of grandeur. Believe it or not, as assertive and um, as almost aggressive or positive that I sound, okay, confident, I would say, okay, I am not. I really am not a self promoter. I'm not very good at it. I don't like it. I also am, as a rabbi, I don't feel particularly comfortable with it. I promote the cause that we're doing. And I actually, my kids and my wife were the ones who really pushed me a lot into social media. I never really used it because it kind of, it didn't resonate with me. I just felt it was kind of wrong. But then they said, you know, Dad, if you use social media, you could save lives. It's not about you. It's about what you can do for other people. And so I'm still in the process of learning that. And my point is, Mary, that I don't, you know, I'm still young enough that I believe that I could save the world. But I'll give you an example to answer your question. Last week on Friday night, which is the Sabbath for us,
Mm-hmm.
a friend of mine who lives near us, his daughter was in crisis. And they came to me, and I was able to guide them, really not myself. It was really through a psychologist who I trust tremendously and who I work, excuse me, in conjunction with. And their daughter's in a completely different place now.
Mm-hmm.
She's living on her own. She's pursuing her career again. She's finishing her university degree. And he and his wife, the couple, they came over to me on the street. They saw me walking and they said, we want you to know that you saved our daughter's life. And to me, I would say, Mary, we say in Hebrew a word called dayenu, which means suffice it. That's sufficient. That is enough.
That's
If
enough.
we just stop there, because at that moment I started to cry. And the reason why I started to cry was because ultimately that was Gila talking to me through them.
Yeah.
So if I could do that, and every time something like that happens, and thank God I've been blessed, as strangely as it sounds, coming from a father who lost his child, I've been blessed having those statements being made to me a number of times. that's sufficient.
That's
That's
sufficient.
that's what it's all about in the end of the
Yeah.
day.
Yeah. That is what it's all about. That lifting and perhaps saving another. You know, in our world, particularly here in the United States, I'm sure you're aware that we have had this incredible rash of school shootings, of people taking guns and killing so many people and then taking their own life. And that need for people to feel the pain that he's been feeling now for so long. I believe that's why the mass shootings is because that's, if they just take their own life, they must wonder, and who will care? But when they can take out so many more, then maybe the world will pay attention to the pain they're feeling and recognize. And all those shootings that happen, every time I see this, I think to myself, at what point could he have been saved? At what point could have something interceded into his life that would have allowed him to be wrapped in love, that would have allowed him to boost himself up if his parents weren't doing it, if social media wasn't doing it, if his friends weren't, if his school, whatever, that he could lift himself. That teaching of self-love and worth. How many more people will be saved? And your focus on mental health and mental wellness and suicide prevention is just that. It is that piece that we all have responsibility for. It can't be like, oh, I'm glad the rabbi's over there doing that. I just got my life here. Okay? But we all must take off the blinders. And those people that we are invisible, those are the people that we need to be visible of the most. And to walk through life without our blinders and just simply ask on a daily basis, do they need me? To see them as they are, to know that I am them and they are me, and that we are all one. That's what we do. That's what both of us do. You have a very special message in as much as that you have a teenage daughter who's suicide. But the same lesson applies to matter what the situation. We just have to see them. How did you see Gila's pain after that you didn't see before?
I saw her pain before.
Ah,
I saw her pain before, but one thing that always disturbs me is I probably didn't completely comprehend or understand the depth of that pain to the extent that someone, Gila, would take her life because of that pain. That's something that I'm not sure if we can completely understand that pain, because the only way someone can really understand the other person's pain is if they've been in the same situation. So, for example, when people who have, unfortunately, tragically, other people who have lost their children, there tends to be a club where we gravitate to each other. And it's a horrible club. It's a sad, tragic club of pain. I just got a call last night from someone who I have no clue who he is, and he's in a completely different community in more ways than one than I am. And he called me and he said, "Would you meet with me? Do you think it'd be helpful for me to speak with you?" And because his daughter died from suicide just a few
ah,
months ago. And the answer is that in all probability it would be helpful only because one needs someone else who understands their pain. Otherwise, there's no way that even close friends of mine who really want to be there and want to help, they just can't comprehend. Thank God, I say, by the way, because it's unimaginable. The only people who really can comprehend are people who have gone through or are at that place. So even for me to understand and comprehend Gila's pain as my daughter, my own flesh and blood, my own genealogy, um, it probably wasn't possible for me to do so in the deepest of fashion. I certainly understood and validated and embraced and tried and anticipated as much as possible, but she probably had a lot of pain that I could not comprehend. Now I understand it more, but then I probably did not understand it enough. And because of that, um, I tell people very often who are suffering from mental illnesses that it's important for them to converse as much as possible. Obviously, it's not
Yeah,
always
yeah,
easy, but to socialize with others who are going through mental challenges.
yeah.
And the reason why is, for example, when Gila went to psychiatric care for 3 weeks, and this is about 2 months before she died, um,
Ah,
it was actually very good for her because what she realized was, number one, there are other teens who are
shh.
suffering as well.
She's not
I'm
alone.
not the
Yeah,
only one. And
yeah,
number two, even better perhaps, was that she realized that there are other people who are trying to better and to improve and to heal themselves. And so I'm capable of doing that as well. And it really was a very good experience for her.
yeah,
So the real pain that we feel, ultimately, we cannot really comprehend it 100%. We can sympathize and
yeah,
empathize with it. There's no question. And we have to, but we can't really understand it fully until, God forbid, we're in that place. So it's important for us to also emphasize the need to relate to people who are going through things that we're going through as well, because they're really ultimately they're really the only people who could understand. Having said that, I do want to mention one thing, Mary, on what you said, and that was about reaching out and looking at the people around us and understanding that they're going through things and trying to relate. The night before Gila died, she took her little brother to the old city in Jerusalem, which you mentioned, and they went to pray by the Western Wall. And then they went up to the old city, and Gila walked into a candy store and she bought a bag of candies, and she emerged from the candy store, and her little brother saw, and he said, "Why'd you buy so many candies? I mean, how many could we eat?" And she said, "No, no, it's not for us. We're now going to take these candies and we're going to give them out to the homeless people in the old city and bring a smile to their face." And this was the night before she died. So
wow.
she understood and wanted very much that others should not have her pain. That was important to her. And
Mm,
it goes back to the message that we're trying to spread. It's so important to us, vis a vis the message that Gila was trying to disseminate as well.
mm, wow. I think of her influence and her power and her joy that lives with us still. And how many people whose lives will be different because she was. Thank you, Rabbi, for being with me today. And all the way from Israel to Utah and Utah to Israel in those beautiful airwaves above us, that we were able
Thank
to
you.
share these moments and that we've been able to perhaps give hope to those who had no hope, whether they be on the end of as a parent or whether they be on the end as a child. Whatever it is that has brought you to these depths of despair, there are others here, and you, my friend, are one of them. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Mary. And I hope to get out to Utah one day and meet you personally.
I would love
And
that.
and that sounds great. And greet you here in Jerusalem once again as well, and
Yeah,
bridge those gaps. So thank you for having me, and
I
may
would
we
love
only
that.
hear joy and only joyous occasions, and help people out there who need the help and make that impact and difference. Thank you so much for hosting me and for spreading your message. And by the way, Mayor, you're not bitter. You're a wonderfully joyous and pleasurable person, and pleasure to meet you and to speak with you. Thank you.
You know, I've thought about that word for a long time, about being bitter. And I think that that is why that we can experience joy, is because we've passed through the bitterness. We've seen that, and we found our resilience, and our joy came in the journey out. And that's what you're in the middle of. That's why you're full of joy, is we find that in the journey. Yeah.
Thank you.
And
I wanted to mention one thing. I'm so sorry, and
no,
it's important for me to say. When you mentioned a little while ago about moving from that grief and the pain and trying to help people, a large part of it also, by the way, and my inspiration is when I look around my family, and we thank God, we have, I always say we have 6 children. One of our children are not with us right now. We have 5 physically living children here in this world. I have 3 more children who I consider my children, my 2 sons-in-law and my
oh,
daughter-in-law.
sure.
And we have
Yeah.
3 grandchildren. And I look at them and I say, wow, I don't have reason. Gila doesn't want me to have reason to
Yeah.
continue to live. And you just look around you and you realize that you do.
Yes. Very much we're the same. And we've included your website link as well as all your social media handles so people can find you, know more about you. I'm going to buy your books today, and you are a joy. You are Gia embodied. Thank you.
Thank you.
Listen to the full podcast today and subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and more. Crafting a Meaningful Life with Mary Crafts.